This is the horrifying story of London's darkest hour, where a serial killer stalked the city, preying on unsuspecting victims and leaving a trail of terror in their wake. But who was this monster, and why does their case remain unsolved to this day? Let's find out in today's episode of Mysteriously. Women, mostly young and working class, were found brutally murdered, their bodies bearing the gruesome mark of a killer's handiwork. The killer seemed to be targeting women working as prostitutes, a grim reality of life in London's underbelly that was rarely acknowledged, let alone addressed. This man had earned his infamy as the last official hangman of the British Navy. Criminal investigation was still under the purview of parish constables and watchmen. At the time, the city's sprawling urban areas were densely populated, offering both challenges and opportunities for the perpetrator. The dense population could have provided the killer with ample opportunity to strike and vanish into the crowd. The sprawling labyrinth of London's streets and poorly lit areas provided an ideal hunting ground for someone looking to evade capture. The killer could easily disappear into the maze of dimly lit alleys and overcrowded neighborhoods, making it difficult for investigators to trace their movements. Unlike his namesake, Thomas Williams had no concrete alibi and was known to frequent the very streets where the murders occurred. Like the others, his alleged connection to the victims was tenuous at best, based largely on circumstantial evidence and witness testimony. Perhaps the most damning piece of evidence against him was a hat found near one of the crime scenes, which bore a striking resemblance to hats known to be owned by Murray. Yet despite these supposed connections, no charges were ever filed. What do you think happened to the victims of the Ratcliffe Highway Murders? And how do you think the case should have been handled differently? Share your thoughts below. Also, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. And finally, if you want to hear more stories like this, then click on the video on the screen now. His alleged confession, if it ever existed, remains lost to history, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. Witnesses even claim to have seen him with one of the victims before she met her demise. All the victims died between August and October 1811. The killer, whoever they were, simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind a legacy of fear and unanswered questions. Though the killer's true identity may never be known, the memory of their victims lives on, a haunting reminder of a predator that even the bustling streets of London could not silence. Their motives, their background, their very identity, all consumed by the abyss of time. This time, the noose around his neck tightened. He was arrested and taken before a magistrate. But when the time came for his trial, the charges against him were mysteriously dropped. Did powerful forces intervene, ensuring his freedom? Was justice manipulated, allowing a killer to roam free? Moreover, the social attitudes and gender roles of the Victorian era presented additional hurdles. The killer's choice of victims, women working as prostitutes, placed them at the margins of society. These women were often marginalized, their testimonies and concerns given little attention or credibility by the authorities. The prevailing social norms and prejudices hindered the investigation, as the police and general public alike might have been reluctant to believe the accounts of such women or to take their safety concerns seriously. The efficiency of this decentralized system was hindered by the lack of effective communication and record keeping. In fact, the modern concept of fingerprinting was still unknown. They combed through witness statements, searching for patterns and clues that could lead them to the killer. Each victim's story, each chilling detail brought them one step closer to understanding the mind of a monster. But the deeper they delved, the more elusive the killer seemed to become. The investigations often relied heavily on eyewitness accounts, which were not always reliable. The people of London found themselves living in a perpetual state of dread, each shadow seeming to hold the face of the killer, each cough echoing the sound of death. The fog, once an ominous presence, now bore witness to their torment. The absence of forensic technology meant that evidence was often lost or mishandled, further complicating the process. Eyewitnesses reported seeing him in the company of some of the victims prior to their demise. Williams, however, had an alibi for the time of one of the murders, having been aboard a ship that sailed to the West Indies after the crime was committed. Although the ship's log supported his alibi, investigators harbored doubts. Could the killer have struck again while Williams was at sea, preying on other victims in a cruel game of cat and mouse? Despite these suspicions, Williams was never formally charged, vanishing into the annals of history with more questions than answers. For instance, in the case of Marion Cotton, the first victim, a crucial piece of evidence, a handkerchief found near the body, disappeared. This lapse in procedure not only hampered the immediate investigation, but also left future inquiries without vital leads. Now retired and living in obscurity, he became the prime suspect in the eyes of many. The theory was compelling. Ketch's past as a hangman suggested a chilling familiarity with the anatomy of death. Could this be the macabre link to the Ratcliffe Highway murders? But the truth, as it often does, lay shrouded in a far more complex web of deceit and darkness. The authorities struggled to make sense of the killings, their inability to stop the carnage only adding to the public's terror. Each new murder fueled the fires of fear, casting long, eerie shadows over the already gloomy streets. As the fog thickened and the body count rose, panic began to grip the city. People huddled indoors, fearing to venture out as night fell, for who knew whose turn it might be next. Among the first to fall victim to this menace was a woman named Marion Cotton. She was discovered in the early hours of August 1811 in the infamous Ratcliffe Highway, hence the name of the killer being called the Ratcliffe Highway Murder or sometimes the Thrall Street Murder. Her throat had been viciously slashed, and her lifeless eyes stared vacantly into the foggy abyss, forever robbed of their light. This chilling scene was merely the prelude to a horrifying symphony of violence and death that was yet to come. In the heart of London in 1811, an eerie fog rolled in, shrouding the city in an ominous gloom that would soon become all too fitting for the horrors that were about to unfold. It was during this chilling season that a series of brutal murders shook the very foundations of London, leaving residents paralyzed with fear and authorities baffled by a mystery they couldn't solve. This was a time when London was in its most transformative phase. The Industrial Revolution was rapidly changing the face of the city, bringing with it unprecedented growth and urbanization. However, this progress came at a cost. Overcrowding and poverty became rampant in the sprawling slums, offering the perfect breeding ground for darkness to thrive. And darkness did indeed breed within these grim shadows. A sinister force emerged, striking terror into the hearts of Londoners. It started subtly enough with a string of seemingly isolated attacks. As days turned into weeks, more bodies were found, each bearing the same horrifying signature, the same chilling testament to the killer's brutality. Amidst this chaos, rumors began to swirl, whispers in the dark corners of London taverns and alleyways linking the crimes to an infamous figure from a bygone era, Jack Ketch. The Scotland Yard was established in 1809, but its purpose was initially limited to just traffic control. Adding another layer of complexity was the sheer volume of London's population. Despite the grim nature of their work, the investigators toiled tirelessly, piecing together fragments of information and chasing elusive leads. As the body count continued to rise, public anxiety reached fever pitch. One intriguing lead pointed towards a sailor named John Williams. Another suspect who loomed in the shadows was a man named Thomas Williams. Yet another suspect who found himself in the crosshairs of suspicion was a certain Mr. J.J. Whoever he was, the details of his life remained shrouded in mystery, known only by the cryptic moniker, In the end, the case grew cold, the killer's identity remaining a secret held close by the fog and shadows of London town. The Ratcliffe Highway Murders continue to fascinate and terrify, reminding us of a time when darkness stalked the streets of one of the world's most iconic cities. Now it's time for you to join the conversation.